May 13th. It's Jason versus Tina.
Don't go in there!
The match made in hell.
There goes the neighborhood.
Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood, rated R. Starts Friday, May 13th at a theater near you.
Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1988 slasher sequel, Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood. Now, this is the 7th installment in the Friday the 13th franchise, and the initial plan from the studio and the production company was not to do this concept of Jason versus Carrie. The initial plan was to do a crossover between the Friday the 13th franchise and A Nightmare on Elm Street. Yes, the initial plan for the latest entry in this franchise was to do Freddy versus Jason. And it got so serious in terms of the talks between the two studios that it almost happened. But for some reason, New Line and Paramount could never come to an agreement. And as a result, Paramount had to scramble to come up with an idea for Part 7. And if you ask me, for what is clearly, by all intents and purposes, a rush job, this film is a lot better than it has any right being. Because it was just one of those movies that Paramount was like, okay, we have a contract, we have a deal, we need to do another Friday the 13th film. We wanted to do something big, something special, something epic with the crossover with A Nightmare on Elm Street, but that didn't work out. What kind of ideas do you have? And then someone mentioned Jason versus Carrie, and they decided to go with that. And as much as I do enjoy this movie, I absolutely am really disappointed that we did not get Freddy vs. Jason in the late 80s, with Paramount and New Line working together and potentially Kane Hodder in this epic, badass makeup design versus Robert Englund's Freddy Krueger, with both of the actors in their prime, with two major studios being involved. I mean, if they came to an agreement, this would have been a big budget film. And on top of that, it would have attracted a lot of filmmakers who would have been really curious and really interested in directing it. It also would have attracted a lot more rising stars or even big name stars to have cameos or to actually star in the movie, because these are two franchises at this point that had become pop culture phenomenons. And if it was marketed properly and the end product was really well put together, it would have been the epic crossover event of the decade. It would have been the biggest box office smash for either franchise, more than likely, because it would probably be one of the highest grossing films of the year it would have gotten released, if not of the decade when it comes to the horror genre. Because there really would not have been anything else like it since maybe the Universal movies, where you had the Universal monsters, where you had Frankenstein versus the Wolfman, stuff like that. I mean, this would have been huge. And it just didn't happen. And it sucks, because I think if you had Paramount and New Line, they would have been able to flex their muscles more with the MPAA, so they would have been able to get away with more in terms of the gore. And the body count probably would have been enormous. Yes, it would have been one of those movies where it could have backfired because of all of the high expectations and so on and so forth. But I still would have loved to have seen it over what we ultimately got with the New Blood and what we would ultimately get with Freddy versus Jason years later. Because that Freddy versus Jason didn't even have Kane Hodder as Jason in it. And yes, you could make the argument that Kane Hodder might not have been cast as Jason for Freddy vs. Jason in the 80s because of the fact that John Carl Buechler probably would not have been the director, so they might have probably went with CJ Graham again or somebody else. And to that, I say I believe in fate, and I believe in the idea that Kane Hodder was just destined to be Jason Voorhees. So he still would have been Jason. And why couldn't John Carl Buechler be the guy to do the effects? So John Carl Buechler still could have been the guy doing the effects for the film, and as a result, Kane Hodder would be brought on board. I know I've spent more time talking about the 80s Freddy vs. Jason, but I'm sorry, I can't help it. I mean, can you imagine that movie with Kane Hodder and Robert Englund and maybe Wes Craven directing? That would have been fucking amazing. Why didn't New Line and Warner Brothers, I mean, not Warner Brothers, but why didn't New Line and Paramount come to an agreement? I mean, for fuck's sake. You would have made bank. Definitely would have made more money than this and Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5 combined in the box office. Guaranteed. So, the ultimate decision was made to not do Freddy vs. Jason, so they went ahead with the New Blood. And they brought John Carl Buechler on board to direct. And he's the reason why Kane Hodder was brought in to play Jason, because Kane Hodder worked with John on the film Prison. And John really liked his gung-ho attitude and thought he would be perfect for Jason Voorhees, and the rest is history. And John Carl Buechler, he directed a couple films before this, and Troll and The Dungeon Master, but this is his directing tour de force. I thought he did a great job directing this film. He definitely showcased a fair amount of talents behind the camera in terms of the way he set up his shots, different camera angles, different zooms, different pans. Uh, I really love the dynamic, kinetic energy that this film has, especially in the finale where Tina is facing off against Jason and using her telekinetic powers to try to stop him. I love the way that that entire series of sequences is shot. It's very exciting, very thrilling, very well done. And I really like that every scene that Jason is in is monstrous and really powerful and intense. And a big part of that is due to John's direction and how he matches the intensity of the directing to the intensity of Kane's performance as Jason Voorhees. Despite the fact that the MPA completely fucked John over and took away nearly all of the impact any of the kills had, the film still has power and it still grabs you because of his lively direction. The screenplay, it's a mixed bag. There are some moments where it really excels, but then there's other moments where it kind of falls a little flat. But overall, for a rush job, I thought Manuel Fidello and Daryl Haney, I thought they did a really solid job with this script. When it comes to the main character and Tina, I thought they did a terrific job making you care about this character and really making you sympathize with her. You felt for her in terms of what happened when she was a kid, where she was dealing with her father being an abusive asshole, and then her anger is what caused his death in a very traumatic moment. And then you have Tina as she's all grown up years later, and she's dealing with different kinds of trauma that all tie back to her past and her abilities, her telekinetic abilities. So you've got a girl who's very shy, who's very withdrawn, who doesn't really want to get involved in a lot of social situations. You've got someone that is understandably inside a shell, but then she's also being taken advantage of by her therapist who's supposed to be helping her in Dr. Cruz. And I felt that the screenplay did a great job handling Dr. Cruz and his shadiness, and honestly making him the de facto main villain of the movie, because Jason is a killer and he's a force of nature that needs to be stopped, but he's actually more likable in the end than Dr. Cruz. Dr. Cruz is an absolutely horrible, just manipulative piece of shit. And the screenplay did a great job making you really hate this guy. And I felt for the most part there were some nice dynamics between other characters and Tina, like Tina and her mother, Amanda, as well as sequences with other members of the cast, like Nick. I felt Tina and Nick were a good couple. They were a good pair. And with the other teenagers that are in the film that are, yes, just there for the body count in a lot of ways, I thought the screenplay did a good job fleshing them out in ways where they don't necessarily have a lot of character development, but the screenplay still fleshed them out in terms of giving them distinct personalities and distinct quirks. So you have the preppy, snotty, rich bitch in Melissa. You have the nerdy science fiction author in Eddie. You have the stoner character. You know, you had a lot of these characters that all had their different quirks and their different dynamics with one another. And I felt the script did a good job with that. And when it comes to the creativity of the kills, I really thought it was a really creative film in that regard as well. I'm not going to say the kills are as good as they could be because of the censoring, but when you see the uncut footage in the slash scenes, you see what the initial intent was, and it's pretty fucking sick and badass in a lot of ways. I mean, Kane Hodder's Jason is crushing people's heads, taking people out with all kinds of different implements, stab somebody in the eye with a party horn, takes out Melissa with an axe to the face. The doctor, Dr. Cruz, gets sliced down the chest with I don't even know what that is, but it's some kind of saw, some kind of power saw. And overall, really creative stuff when it comes to the kills. The sleeping bag kill, one of my favorite kills in the entire series, and I think Kane's favorite kill, the sleeping bag kill. It's too bad that the original uncut kill was not included in the final cut of the film, because the Motion Picture Association of America are a bunch of fucking assholes and pussies. But what you still get is still an iconic sequence. And I know I mentioned the axe to the face, but I'm going to mention it again because it's a real crowd pleaser. And I just love that scene where Melissa is just being her usual bitchy self, and she opens the door and Jason just throws the axe in her face, and he might as well have been giving her the middle finger. He was just like, fuck you, and just throws her ass onto the table. It was just a great sequence, and I've just loved that scene. And then the creativity is also on display when it comes to the use of Tina's telekinetic abilities in the finale. I really love how that whole sequence is set up. I mean, you have Tina throwing a TV at Jason, the whole scene where Jason's going up the stairs and she's hitting him with these lights. Prior to him facing off with Tina in that house, she's using the branches of the tree to trip him up and throw him into the mud. And then in the final series of sequences where she's giving Jason the final blows, I mean, she sends him falling through the stairs. She uses her abilities to cover him in gasoline, then opens the furnace, lights it on fire, sends fire out of the furnace, and lights Jason ablaze, and the whole house explodes, and a really awesome practical explosion. And it's just one of those things where it's just a really well put together film when it comes to a lot of these set pieces. So I want to give the screenwriters a lot of credit for that. Where it kind of doesn't always work is some of the humor, some of the moments where it's trying to be a little more serious. Other stuff where I don't understand why they went this route. I didn't really feel that Amanda had to die, especially the way that she did. But I guess they set it up that way so Dr. Cruz is even more hateable as a character because he's such a fucking coward. But I still would have liked her to live. Tina's been through enough. She didn't need to lose her mom too. Um, it's just one of those films that overall it's a solid script. It's got some issues here and there, but for the most part, definitely one of the better screenplays in the franchise for me. And the cast, I thought, was also pretty good. Lar Park Lincoln as Tina. The performance is a little uneven at times. Uh, it almost appears as if she's being asked to do something, but it's something that doesn't really fit with her strengths. So it's one of those things where when she's trying to be more of a typical teenage character with the banter and everything, she comes across a little awkward. But when she's dealing with extreme emotions, I felt she was really on the money. And when she's using her telekinetic abilities, and you're noticing the strife that's on her face as she's trying to, control her emotions, I thought that was handled pretty well. Um, and you got Kevin Blair as Nick Rogers. I liked him. I thought he was a good bit of a romantic interest for Tina. I thought they had some good chemistry with one another. Lar Park Lincoln and Kevin. Interestingly enough, apparently they did not get along at all on the set. They were not close. It's hard to really tell because it doesn't seem like they have issues chemistry wise. But yeah, they did not get along. And years later, though, they reconciled and actually became pretty close friends. Susan Blue, I thought, did a really great job as Amanda Shepard. One of the best performances I've seen from an adult character in this franchise. I thought Susan Blue was really quite special as Amanda. Her scenes with Terry Kiser were very dynamic and strong. Terry Kiser, he also was terrific as Dr. Cruz. Very different kind of role for him. Normally he doesn't play these kind of characters, and he really pulled it off, though. Staci Greason as Jane McDowell. Deborah Kessler as Judith. Michael Schroeder as Dan. They all did their jobs fairly well enough. Susan Jennifer Sullivan as Melissa. Great performance. I hated her. She was a fucking bitch. But she owned it. She owned the bitchiness of the role. Elizabeth Kaitan as Robin Peterson. She was fun the little bit that she was in. John Renfield and Jeff Bennett as David and Edward, Heidi Kozak as Sandra, Diana Barrows as Madison, Larry Cox as Russell, Craig Thomas as Benjamin, Diane Almeida as Catherine Bataki. All of those actors held their own pretty well too. I want to mention Jeff Bennett as Eddie. I really liked his take on that character. Very quirky, very fun. Definitely a nerdy guy, but you definitely did start to really enjoy the guy and enjoy his take on the character. So it was a bit of a bummer when he was manipulated by Melissa and then ultimately died. It did kind of suck. So yeah, for the most part, pretty strong cast, and of course, you got to mention Kane Hodder, the man himself as Jason Voorhees. His stunt background definitely came into play when he did the 40-second body burn in the film's climax, and he just brought a level of intensity that I don't feel any other Jason actor, except for maybe Ted White, really brought to the role. And he just bought into it hook, line, and sinker. I mean, there's a story from the set that I thought was pretty hilarious and pretty awesome, actually, where there was supposed to be a visit to the set by a local sheriff late one night while they were shooting. And Kane was in full makeup, and this guy kept pestering him and kept bugging him and asking him whether or not he was a part of the set, whether or not he was a part of the film. And Kane thought this guy was just being stupid because, duh, look at me. I'm dressed like Jason Voorhees. I'm dressed like zombie Jason. Yeah, I'm a part of the set. I'm a part of the film. But the guy just would not stop. He would not quit pestering Kane. So Kane, having enough, he lunged at the guy and grunted, and apparently it scared the guy shitless to the point where like he was just running away and tripped over over a branch or tripped over his own feet. This guy's running away screaming. And then you find out later that the guy that Kane lunged at and grunted at was the sheriff. So that's how committed Kane Hodder was to the role of Jason Voorhees. He was scaring real people, real sheriffs, shitless. I just thought that was a great story. That's a great bit of trivia. Now, some other things I want to mention about the film are definitely the effects by John Carter Buechler. I mean, not only do you have this really iconic, great design of Jason, where he's just so menacing and monstrous in this, but you also have really nice touches with that design, like the exposed bones and the rotting flesh, and then when the mask splits open and you see Jason's face. Really love the design there as well, with the cloudy eyes and the messed up teeth and the really rotting and almost burnt skin. And then when you have the other kills, I mean, there's a lot of creativity, a lot of fun there with these kill sequences, and the visual effects with the telekinetic battle at the end, just amazing. I thought the visual effects and the mechanical stuff that the effects guys did during that finale is some of the best that I've seen with that kind of stuff that goes on in a film, where you have things floating around and moving around on their own, with the use of wires and other things. I mean, I just thought it was a really impressive display of practical, technical effects. It was just a lot of wizards at work here, and I really love the way everything is set up effects wise. Using the lamp and the wire to snake around Jason and hang him, and then send him flying through the floor. Just a lot of really great bits of visual effects that are just not only creative but effective and came across as very genuine and real. And the score, I will say this, the score is one thing about the film that I think is a little weak. You got Harry Manfredini and Fred Molan who do a collaboration here. While on one hand, it was interesting to hear another composer do something for this franchise, because at this point, Harry Manfredini was doing everything. He was doing the score for every single film, and it was really starting to get to the point where, even though he had some really high points, like Part 6 and some moments in Part 5, it was almost really to the point where the franchise could benefit from having a different voice when it comes to the music. And this is a film that you can see why Harry was the one that was always asked to work on these films, because Fred Molan's extra work here, while there are some exceptions where the new score actually is pretty good. I would say the opening credits is one of them. But there are other bits where it just is too loud and too overbearing and too mechanical in terms of the fact that it uses a lot of synthesizer stuff, and it just doesn't really fit with this franchise that well. So, and it's really glaring when you have mixes of Manfredini's more traditional score and Molan's more mechanical synthesizer infused score, and it just doesn't really blend very well. So it's a very mixed bag when it comes to the score. Some moments really do work, some moments kind of fall flat. So all in all, one of the weaker scores in the series. From a technical standpoint, the film is also pretty solid with the cinematography by Paul Elliott, the editing in particular by Maureen O'Connell, Martin J. Sadoff, and Barry Zetlin. I thought the editing in this film was excellent, especially when it comes to the sequences where Tina is using her telekinetic abilities to just completely overwhelm Jason Voorhees. Just love the way that that sequence is edited, and I honestly just like the way the film is edited in general. And goes by at a really quick pace. 88 minutes. It's a breeze. It's a blast. And yes, it would have been nice to have seen the uncut kills put back into the film in HD. It's really unfortunate that those were left on the cutting room floor and you don't have the actual print to work with, like something like My Bloody Valentine or some of the other Friday the 13th films. And you could tell that the decision by the MPAA to butcher things so much definitely is on the screen, because there are certain kills that you can tell things have been done to edit stuff out. And there's certain kills where I think stuff was just changed. Like, for instance, I believe it was Elizabeth Kaitan's character, Robin. She's thrown through a window, and I think the plan was to kill her a different way, but the effect didn't work. So they just decided to go with this throwing her through a window last minute thing, and that shows. That's one of the weakest kills in the entire movie, and it just reeks of a rehash of one of the kills from Part 4, where the girl gets thrown through the window. And it was handled a lot better in that than it is here. It looked kind of clunky and definitely looked rushed. It looked like something they did last minute. Was very rough around the edges. But despite some of the misgivings or the moments where the film misfires, And the fact that, once again, you have this giant missed opportunity, and the fact that you did not get Freddy versus Jason. It's still a really enjoyable, solid slasher sequel. So yeah, I enjoy The New Blood. I actually think it's a little bit underrated when you think about it. And it features the most badass, most epic looking Jason in zombie Jason, played by Kane Hodder. So that's always a highlight. And I just love that finale. I love the finale to death, where Tina is facing off against Jason and using her telekinetic powers to take him out. Anyway, thank you for watching my review of Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.